All right, all right, all right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to This Week in Space. I'm your host with the most, Joan Emerson Bell. I'm a astrologer, tarot reader, sometimes astrology themed DJ. Also, I'm now a licensed mental health counselor. I Last week I was talking about how I was like super stressed out about my test, which was happening the day after last week's report came out, and I passed. Thank you all for sending me some energy and well wishes and prayers as I went into that initiation, and now it's done. And I guess I'm a licensed mental health professional now, which is like that's really weird, but pretty awesome. Thank you. So yeah, I'm kind of in my post-test collapse. Thank you, Gina Maria, which is why I'm a couple minutes late today. But I don't know. I do this for free. I work for myself, so I'll show up when I can. But thank you all for being here. We've got a pretty intense week in space this week. I'm gonna break it down to the best of my abilities. Before we get into the astrology, I just want to let folks know that I'm going to be co-facilitating a retreat at the end of September in Epidavros, Greece, with the excellent and talented Sarah Janes. Sarah Janes is a mythologist and author and dream worker, and we're going to be talking about sacred waters. We're going to be doing some trips to sacred springs in Greece. We'll be talking about mythology. I'll be talking about the water signs in astrology. Be talking about the element of water and magic. A lot of magic, a lot of dream work, a lot of cool adventures. If you can, I would love to see you there. It'll be occurring during the autumnal equinox. So we'll also be talking about that and the shifting of the seasons. If you are interested, I think that there's like maybe one or two slots left. You can go to themysteries.org and go to the retreats tab to check it out and sign up. I really hope to see you there. I'll also there's a link in my bio on Instagram, and I will put a link in the show notes on the podcast version as well as the YouTube version. So that is that. I hope you can join us. Now, let's get all up in this week in space. We're talking about the week in space from July the 21st, which is today. And it's kind of crazy that we're already at July 21st. This has maybe been the longest and shortest year of my life. And so, July 21st through July 27th in the year of our Lord 2025. So, kicking it all off, I just want to do a little Mercury Gatorade recap because over the weekend or last week, just as Mercury was stationing retrograde, we had astronomer CEO Andy Bryan, or Byron, excuse me, who was caught on the Jumbotron embracing a female co-worker at a Coldplay concert in Foxborough, Mass. Yeah, Boston, go Sox. So this happened July the 16th, just as Mercury was slowing down to station retrograde the next day. And I think that this is a perfect Mercury in Gatorade story in Leo, because one of the themes that comes up, and I talked about this last week, but like rethinking being in the spotlight, right? Where maybe like being on the big screen creates issues, especially if you're having an affair and dating one of your subordinates at work, right? And having your image projected onto the jumbotron while you're doing some shady business is maybe like not great. So Mercury and Leo looking for the spotlight, wanting to be seen, and then sometimes visibility is not the greatest thing. And so Mercury retrograde through Leo is really causing us to rethink our visibility, right? And how we are seen, what we are seen for, because like everybody wants to like be on the big screen until you get kind of caught and caught in a compromising position. And I think that this also brings up issues of visibility, right? Leo, Mercury retrograde in Leo, Sun in Leo, Sun's entering Leo this week, as well as surveillance culture, which is Pluto and Aquarius, where we are, all at all times now on camera, on social media. There's images of everyone floating around constantly. And what this does to our sense of self, what this does to our ability to be authentic in the world when we are constantly on camera, and things can come up when you're just trying to, hug on your employee while you told your wife that you were, out with your work buddies, and then you get caught on the jumbotron. So some interesting Mercury Gatorade cautionary tales right now. So just something to remember, that the whole world is a stage, and for better or for worse. Um, Ooh, and Gina Maria is saying time is a whole thing of weirdness in 2025, weird equaling the stretched out and shortening at the same time. And I really agree with that. And I think that has a lot to do with, the Saturn Neptune conjunction, which is not going to like exactly perfect until 2026, February of 2026, but it's pretty dang close. And Saturn rules time, Neptune is dissolving, so I think that we are going through this period of our sense of linear time dissolving in some ways, or shifting, or being washed away. Anyway, let's get into the astrology of the week. Yes. So Tuesday, July the 22nd, we have the sun entering the fixed fire sign of Leo. As the sun enters into Leo, they go into their rulership. The sun is at home in Leo. Leo has all the glittery, sparkly, golden, flamboyant business that the sun just eats up. Right. And this is the part of the summer in the northern hemisphere where it feels like the sun is at its hottest and its full power, right? When the sun enters into their home sign of Leo, right? The sun has more resources here to take care of business. And so what is the sun trying to do? Right? What is the business that the sun is trying to take care of? Good morning, Jesse Brown. Nice to see you, my friend. Right? The sun shines its light. That's what the sun's business is. And it shines its light on anything and everything that's around to receive it, whether they want to or not. Right. And I think that Leo can function in much the same way. The archetype of Leo shows up in the world and says, "It's me, love me, look at what I did." Right. And I think that this is great. And then it receives feedback from the world, right? And from those around them. And this feedback can be like, "Yes, we totally love you. Give us more." Or, "Wow, that was like a little too much, dude. Like, can you turn it down a little bit?" Right. And then Leo then takes that feedback and reorients in order to find a way to be received and to receive love. Right. And it's sort of this feedback loop that Leo is involved with. And so, at the heart of this archetype, I think that Leo just wants to belong and to be appreciated for who they truly are, right? And I'm talking about Leo here, but I think that this is applicable to the sun in general in all of our charts, right? It's the way that we shine our light, and that light gets reflected back from those around us, and we get feedback about how we show up and what we are seen for. And I think that we all just want to be seen and appreciated for this light that we shine into the world. And this can become complicated if the feedback that we get pulls us away from who we truly are. And what can happen with the solar or the Leo archetype is that if we get feedback that tells us what we have to offer is too much or unappreciated in some way, then we can take this feedback and shift our orientation, right, to sort of mold to it and meld to it. And this can cause people to dim their light or try to hide it because it's unappreciated or, in extreme cases, really unsafe. We also might get positive feedback for doing things that feel kind of inauthentic, right? Which makes us think that if we do more of this, then we'll be accepted and received, and we'll get the love and appreciation that we want. An example of this might be posting on Instagram or social media something really meaningful, right? Like an artwork or creative process that you worked really hard on and feels really authentic, right? And then you get like 12 likes. Does that ever happen to anybody out there? Right? You're like, this is the like really meaningful thing. You put it out there and like nothing, crickets. Like, three of your family members and like one of your closest friends likes it, right? And then you post like a thirst trap, right? You get like 300 likes, right, in minutes, right? And so what does this tell us about acceptance, right? The data that we receive from this hypothetical experience says that your authentic creative process isn't valued, but your sexuality is. So to be accepted, just be more sexual, right? Or post more thirst traps, or post more like this person, and then you receive the acceptance that we're longing for. And this can sort of like shift the way that we show up in the world, or how we share our light. And this causes us to dim our light or contort our light to try and find that sense of acceptance, right? And this is the tension between Leo, the individual, and the unique sense of self-expression, and Aquarius, the collective, and the feedback that we receive from the larger world, right? And this tension, this polarity is really activated this week with this new moon opposing Pluto. And so ideally, we are trying to blend the individual with the collective in healthy ways, but it's a really delicate balance, right? If the individual is too powerful or takes up too much space, they have an impact on, and they tend to impact the ability of others around them to shine their own light, or to stand in their light, right, of their own sun. If the collective is too strong, it can kind of crush the light of the individual and prevent them from sharing their unique and authentic sense of self. And so we're really trying to find the balance here, right? And so as the sun enters into Leo, they are confronted with an opposition to Pluto, who is currently retrograde at 2 degrees of Aquarius. The sun will perfect this opposition on Friday, so we'll talk about that more in this section of your program at the very end. But just to note, Pluto is a planet of power and control. It has a lot to do with our instincts and survival drives. And as the sun is in its rulership, it's kind of really feeling itself and its heroic, authentic nature. And then during this new moon, and then perfecting at the end of the week, it will kind of face off with Pluto and the power of the collective, which can really overwhelm the individual sense of self. So, Tuesday, July the 22nd, the sun in Leo sextiles Uranus in Gemini. This is happening at 0 degrees and 38 minutes. So just as the sun entering into Leo, they come into a supportive sextile with Uranus. And a sextile is a communicative aspect, right? It's harmonious, but it takes a little work to activate, right? So it can create ease, but we can also work with it if we like kind of catch a thread and like put in a little energy to make things happen. Right. This transit can bring some excitement, perhaps a break from the norm. Uranus is a planet of liberation and revolution, kind of inspiration, radical new ways of thinking. It breaks systems, right? So there's a chance to gain perspective and get some insight on the places where things feel stuck, and the ways that perhaps we can move through these blockages to experience a little bit more freedom. Again, with the sun, especially in Leo, we're talking about like what is meaningful to me, who I truly am, what is my authentic self, right? And noticing the places where that might feel a little constricted or stuck. And Uranus can be like, yo, what if we just did this? Or like try this new creative approach, or try to look at things in a different way, or get a new perspective, right? So you may find yourself noticing some of the restrictions in your life. And this transit can help us to find innovative ways to kind of circumvent those limitations. This is a supportive aspect that kind of asks us to recognize our individuality, and the places that that sense of individuality might be like compromised, or in like other cases sacrificed in order to fit in or to belong. right? Or to succeed. So we can ask ourselves, how do we honor our individuality and authenticity given the structures that we are living in, right? And what might need to shift to give a little bit more space, a little bit more freedom so that light can really shine, right? And we can ask ourselves, how do we really honor who we truly are? And so you might notice old patterns coming up around belonging, or, right? Or how we behave in order to fit in or to belong. And so we're not trying to break all these old patterns today, right? Sextile, like this is going to last for a couple days, right? We're not trying to like do a bunch of work. Perhaps if this is happening in your natal chart, there's a little bit more oomph, right? But for the rest of us, for the collective, right, maybe it's enough to just notice what's going on, what's coming up, noticing these old patterns that are emerging, because sometimes insight can be enough, right? And if we can get a good sense of what it feels like when we are in our authenticity, then we can have that as a reference point to know when we are being pulled out of that alignment. Right? In real talk, we live in a society where we need to make compromises, right? This is part of the Aquarian world, right? We have the Leo individual who shows up and it's like, this is me. And then the Aquarian greater world who is like, yeah, but we're doing this, right? And so sometimes we need to make compromises, and there's nothing wrong with that. And this is sort of at the core of the Leo archetype. The question of how to be truly me and to fit into the Aquarian world of the correct collective. And it doesn't need to be all or nothing. We don't really do all or nothing on this show, right? But it may be enough to notice where we land on the spectrum of individuality and how we can honor the light that burns within us without scorching everything around us, right? And this is a very important balance to strike. And this is going to be a theme throughout today's show. And so, in the support of sextile, Uranus can help us to notice the places where we might need a little bit more space to be ourselves. Uranus helps us to break down old systems and shift these existing patterns, right, in order to feel a bit more authentic and to experience more freedom in our lives and in the world. The sun is the central archetype of the self. It's our identity and what we are striving for. It is the kind of center of our psyche that everything orbits around. And so today we might notice what old structures might be limiting in the ways that we express ourselves, or what societal constructs are constricting us and forcing us, excuse me, to conform or to dim our light in some ways. We also might notice internal patterns or old stories that are preventing us from feeling free enough to be who we truly are. And again, with this sextile, it's probably not going to be about changing everything, on Tuesday or today or on Wednesday. It might be enough to just notice those places of constriction and those old patterns that we're starting to rub against, and the places where we feel called to grow into a deeper sense of self. And once we see the places of limitation and constriction, then we can begin to work towards shifting those old structures and patterns. And one last thing, we are living in an increasingly restrictive and authoritarian world, which really sucks, right? And one thing that I would caution against is projecting all of those feelings of limitation out onto external systems, right? These systems are real and they're shitty. And if we spend all of our time blaming these external forces for our issues, then it robs us of our power to create change and to grow, right? It becomes really disempowering, and it sort of throws us into a victim role. If that thing or that person or that system is doing this to me, right, then where is my agency to create change, right? The sun in Leo is about stepping into our personal power as sovereign individuals. And I think part of this sense of sovereignty is calling back our inner authority from external forces. And this has a lot to do with Saturn's movement through Aries, and we'll talk about that a little later, right? With Uranus's 7-year journey through Gemini, it's teaching us to hold multiple things in radical new ways. So, how do we hold both the external conditions and the way that those forces of oppression have become internalized, right? And how are we sort of oppressing ourselves through retelling stories that have been told to us by external forces, external authorities that have robbed us of our power, right? And we probably have more agency to shift our internal system and the ways that we repress ourselves more easily than we can shift the external systems which we're operating within. And I think that change really begins in the individual. And that doesn't mean like just like go do your own work and like separate yourself from society forever, right? I think that these things happen simultaneously. And as we do our own work, then we are better equipped to show up and do work in the collective. And again, this is the Leo individual and Aquarius collective balance that we are that's really being activated this week. So, moving right along. Wednesday, July the 23rd. We have Venus in Gemini squaring Mars in Virgo. This is happening at 21 degrees and 0 arc minutes. So a square is a hard aspect where we have two planets or archetypes or ideals, right, at cross purposes. And so this transit can bring up a lot of tension in relationships as well as creative tension, right? Venus in Gemini is interested in plurality. They want to gather information about what feels good from a multiplicity of sources. They're interested in socializing and connecting, and they can be a bit of a social butterfly, moving from situation to situation, sharing and receiving information, which helps them to inform their value system and increase their ability to feel good in the world. Mars in Virgo is looking for the right thing, not all this stuff, but like this is what is right. Mars is direct, it's action, right? It's penetrating, it's cutting, it like sees the thing and it's like, I'm going for that, right? In Virgo, Mars is about cutting away the imperfections and editing experiences until they reach a certain level of perfection, the right thing, right? And herein lies the tension of the square, my friends. Venus in Gemini wants to be open to possibilities. Mars in Virgo will not settle for anything that isn't perfect, that isn't the right thing. And you kind of can't have it both ways, right? And so with this transit, there may be unfolding within you, right? The desire to party hop and connect with a bunch of people and have a nice light time, while at the same time feeling that nothing really hits. And this may create feelings of frustration, right? That things are not meeting your expectations. Oh, this party sucks, right? Or this conversation was unfulfilling, or like, oh, it's just not right. Can lead Mars to want to cut things off or cut things out, right? Which tends to happen. What tends to happen is that when we experience these energies on an internal level, we might not recognize what's actually happening. And again, project one of the roles out onto somebody else in our life, like a boss, a partner, a friend, a coworker, right? We may cast them in the Venus in Gemini role, where we perceive they are being flaky or they're not available for the deeper level of connection that Mars in Virgo is really striving for. Or we may cast them, the other person, in the role of Mars in Virgo, and we may feel that they are holding us to unfair standards or cutting us off from the things that we really enjoy. We may feel like they are creating needless struggles or conflicts that are really a buzzkill when we're just trying to have a good time. And this is one of the things about Mars, especially in relationship with Venus. One of the ways that Mars finds connection is through conflict, right? Venus in Gemini likes to talk and gossip and socialize as a way of connecting with those around them. Mars in Virgo likes to argue. They like to be right. I know this for a fact because I have my natal Mars in Virgo, right? And this is about like sharpening and refining one's knowing and one's ability to communicate. It's not just about arguing for the sake of arguing, right? It's sharpening the blade of Mars to like get to the point, right? And so through engaging in argument and debate, Mars feels like they are in connection with the person that they are arguing or debating with, which can be great if the other person is game, right? But I can imagine Venus and Gemini just like rolling their eyes when Mars comes up and tries to prove a point or be right. And I can see Venus walking away and just talking to somebody else at the party so that they can have an enjoyable conversation, maybe some light banter, some hot gossip, right? And I can imagine that this really inflames Mars, who may try and insert themselves again in order to like be right and make their point. And this is one of the ways that this square can unfold. And again, this is happening within you, right? And It may find ways of playing out in your external world as well and mirroring that internal tension between the ways these parts seek to fulfill their needs for connection. And remember, like connection is at the core of this. So, my friends, to make matters worse, right? Mercury, the ruler of both Gemini and Virgo, stationed retrograde last Thursday, July the 17th. We talked about this last week, but as the ruler of both Gemini and Virgo, Mercury is the planet who can resource both Venus, who's in Gemini, and Mars, who's in Virgo, as they are staying in Mercury's homes, right? Or they're like renting from Mercury's Airbnbs. And Mercury has the ability to resource these planets while they're there. However, Mercury is now busy rethinking, redoing, reconsidering how they communicate their most authentic self while they are in fiery Leo, and they may not have the time or the wherewithal to be able to attend to the needs of their renters. And this can leave both Venus and Mars pretty under-resourced in these two Mercury-ruled signs. So what does this look like, right? We are in all types of relationships that require communication. And with this square, which is again, a tense aspect, we may find that we are experiencing miscommunications, which is some Mercury Gatorade business, right? Or we might experience confusion in our relationship or confusion with our roles in our relationship. There may be tension arising from miscommunications, or we may find that we are coming at the same central issue from two different angles, and it may take time and patience to be able to find that common ground. For example, one person may say something like, "We've got nothing in common, no common ground to start from, and we're falling apart." They may even say, "The world has come between us, our lives have come between us. Still, I know you just don't care." And the other person may say something like, "Well, what about breakfast at Tiffany's?" And the person may say, "I think I remember the film. And as I recall, I think we both kind of liked it." And, you may say, "Well, that's one thing we've got." And so, my friends, as you are navigating this transit with Mercury and Gatorade, see what you can do about slowing down and trying to find some common ground, like breakfast at Tiffany's, or at least a place of connection that you can start from. Again, Mars may want to do things their way, and they may think that their way is the only way. And Venus may not want to just go and Venus may not want to just like go along with Mars, right? They want to go where it's light and fun. But I imagine if you practice listening and try and stay open and have a little patience, issues can get resolved before they spiral into full-blown conflicts that result in being cut off or abandoned. And on the other side, you may find that you have developed a better ability to sit through something challenging. You may even have developed some new communication skills. You may also find that you have found new places of common ground that help to strengthen your existing relationships. Lastly, all types of relationships experience issues. And I'm talking about relationships with family, your partner, your spouse, the barista at the coffee shop, your friends or coworkers. All of these relationships experience issues, and tension arises at one time or another. And that's totally fine, right? This is normal. A rift in relationship is like common, it's normal, right? This is how relationships function. What matters most is how you repair that rift. And it's the places that we are able to sort of create that repair that ultimately make the relationship stronger. And that's important and vital for lasting connection. And so moving on to Thursday, July the 24th, and the new moon in Leo. And thank you, Bear and Jesse Brown, for getting my breakfast at Tiffany reference. um, this is what happens when I don't do my radio show. It just leaks out of me. And by the way, I do a astrology themed radio show, which is on hiatus at the moment as I'm recovering from my test and trying to have a little bit of a summer break. And I just want to check the comments real quick. Oh, Kendra Deluxe saying, recently noticed how many heads of state have Mars in Virgo. Yeah, I was not aware of that. but that makes a lot of sense, right? My experience with Mars and Virgo is striving for excellence, right? And trying to like get to the point and like get it right, which, it's taken me a long time to be like, whatever. Which I think is the other piece of that, right? That's a learning that we get to experience. So, Thursday, July the 24th, we got the new moon in Leo coming in hot at 2 degrees and 8 arc minutes of that fixed fire sign. And just so y'all know, a new moon is always going to be a conjunction with the sun and moon. So they are in the same sign at the same degree. This will be occurring at 12:11 p.m. Pacific time, making that 3:11 p.m. on the East Coast. Couple big aspects that are occurring during this new moon. Excuse me. The new moon will be opposed to Pluto. Will also be trine Saturn and Neptune, who are like basically conjunct, and it'll be sextile to Uranus. And all of these aspects are within like 2 degrees, right? 2 or 3 degrees. So pretty tight aspects to basically all of the outer planets, including Saturn. Right. So big stuff right there that'll be unfolding over the lunar cycle. So, yeah, we got this new moon in Leo opposing Pluto in Aquarius. Pluto is currently retrograde at 2 degrees and 36 arc minutes of the sign of the water bearer, right? And the moon will perfect their opposition to Pluto about 5 hours after the new moon perfects. And then the sun perfects their opposition to Pluto early Friday morning. I think it happens like midnight Mountain Time, or that would be late Thursday evening for y'all on the West Coast. And so this means that Pluto is all up in the mix of this new moon, which has potential to activate a pretty transformational lunar cycle. And it also might be pretty intense. And speaking of intense, this new moon is also trine Saturn and Neptune and sextile Uranus. So it's actively engaging with all of the outer planets as well as Saturn. And so there's some big stuff there, right? And the new moon is a seeding moment, right? It is the full out breath. You feel that? That's that new moon, right? It's the letting go and opening space for something new to come in and to take root. So, with the relationship between the sun and the moon, this occurs throughout the 28 days of the lunar cycle. And this is one of the core rhythms of our lives here on Spaceship Earth. So, every month we move from the empty vessel of the new moon into the overflow of the full moon, and then a sort of editing down and an emptying out, which creates the space for the next cycle to begin and new things to come into form. Right. So with this new moon, we have the seeding moment, which is happening in the sign of Leo. And we talked a lot about the archetype of Leo earlier in the show. And so here we have the seeding moment coming in the sign where the sun makes its home, right? This is occurring across the zodiac from where Pluto, Lord of the underworld, is bringing up issues of power, transformation, initiation. Pluto deals with processes of death and rebirth. And with this new moon in Leo, there may be an opportunity for us to engage in a process of transformation around how we show up in the world and how we express our authentic self. The new moon precedes the birth of the emerging moon and the new lunar cycle. Right? However, in order for this new sense of self or identity to emerge, we may need to allow some older ideas or old stories to die and become composted to make space for something new to come into being. The Leo archetype deals with coming to terms with our animal nature, right? And channeling that vital force into creative and constructive processes, right? Leo the lion, which is one of the only, which is a animal that can kill a human being, right? And this also lives within us, the sort of animal nature, the animal drives, and part of this Leo archetype is learning to work with them, learning to tame them, or learning to befriend them so we can work with them and access that power in skillful ways, right? And so as we hold the tension between what we aspire towards and that inner light that burns within us, right? We are kind of confronted with all these unconscious forces and survival drives that are operating under the surface in the dark recesses of our psyche, right? Pluto deals with power as well as our survival instincts and the psychic energy that lives in the unconscious, right? And so we're like with this opposition between the new moon and Pluto, we're really needing to work with these deeper forces and these drives for power, which can, as we can work with them skillfully, they can help us to shine our light into the world. But on the other hand, they can destroy us if we wield them unskillfully, right? Leo strives to sort of tame the power of our animal instincts through becoming conscious and using our will to power to direct that vital energy. And this is one of the major themes of this new moon. How to recognize the drives that are emerging in the self and working to utilize that in skillful ways in the service of one's authentic self and greater aspirations, as well as the Aquarian collective, right? It's not easy, but it's doable. And I'll talk more about some of the ways that this can look when we get to the sun's opposition with Pluto, which we'll round out the show with this week. So this lunation is also supported by a trine from Saturn and Neptune. Both of these aspects perfect the same day as the new moon. And I'll talk more in depth about each of these transits in a moment. But in relation to this new moon, they can help us to structure the ways that we show up for this confrontation with the underworld in order to use the emerging psychic energy skillfully. And the trine to Neptune helps us to hold the larger vision that can help us to orient, right, as we navigate through the shadow of the underworld. Because the underworld is a confusing place. There's not a lot of light there, and there's many rivers, right? The river of forgetting is really kind of key one in the underworld. And if we drink from the river of forgetting, then we can lose our sense of self. We can lose our sense of purpose. We can lose that greater vision that Neptune can offer us, right? And Neptune really helps us to hold this bigger vision or this dream that can help us move through this unconscious land. And Neptune also reminds us of the interconnected web of life, and that as the light shines brighter in one area of the web, it can ripple outwards and support other places that might still be scrambling in the dark. But I want to move on and talk about these transits in a bit more detail. And these are all happening around the time of the new moon. So it's so as I talk about these transits specifically, this is applicable to the energy of the lunation and how it will kind of ripen and reveal itself throughout the lunar cycle. Dig? So also, Thursday, July the 24th, we have the sun in Leo trine Saturn in Aries. This is occurring at 1 degree and 49 arc minutes of the cardinal fire sign of Aries. And so Saturn through Aries, one of the themes with it is reclaiming our internal authority from external structures. Aries is a sign where the sun is exalted, right? So there's the sun's sense of sovereignty and rulership, right? And the heroic quest. But Saturn is in their fall. So Saturn has a really hard time, and the sort of structuring and the patience and the dedication that Saturn has kind of makes things more complicated for them to maintain the status quo and to create long-lasting systems. So this sets up an interesting dynamic around external forces, perhaps Saturn, that seek to maintain the status quo in our inner sense of agency, right? The sun. And this is a supportive trine where the sun and Saturn can work together in a harmonious relationship, which can help us to develop our own structures that allow us to express ourselves and develop a greater sense of agency in the world. Oftentimes, structure tends to be outsourced to external systems, school, jobs, bus schedules, you name it, right? Our schedules tend to be dictated by external systems and where we need to be and when we need to be there. These external systems helps us to structure our lives, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with this unless there is, right? However, what happens if we are able to reclaim these structures and to work to create systems for ourselves that help us to drive and achieve towards what we are striving for, instead of relying on the external world to sort of support us in doing that. Maybe this is about finding this balance, right? This is not like reclaiming our inner authority is not going to be accomplished in one day, right? Or redoing our schedule and like owning our schedules, right, is not going to be done in one day, but it's something to think about, right? With Saturn in their fall in Aries, coming within a breath of a conjunction with Neptune, external systems are crumbling, right? Social safety nets are dissolving, and it might be time to call back some of the energy that we have given to external forces to structure and support our lives, and to consider the ways that we can create internal systems that allow us to thrive on more local levels and more individual levels. The sun in Leo is looking to shine its light, and Saturn can help with that through providing the limitations that allow us to know how we are able to accomplish our goals and where things will work and where things won't work, right? And this is where limitations can be really helpful, knowing, okay, this is my lane, right? These are the guardrails, or this is the cliff. And if I veer off the cliff and do a Thelma and Louise, like maybe that's not the best thing right now, right? You want to save that for like the most important point at the end of the movie, not in the middle, right? So Saturn also helps us to commit to the bit, right? It asks us what we are willing to do in order to achieve our goals, what we are willing to dedicate to in order to make it real. And this can be really helpful for the sun here, who just wants to be a star, right? But if you're going to be a star, what are you willing to do? Are you going to practice, right? Or like, how are you going to make this happen? Saturn helps us to accomplish our goals through hard work and commitment. And hard work and commitment may not sound like a lot of fun, but it's through the dedication that Saturn asked for that we are able to accomplish great things. And so, what is key here is finding ways of structuring our time and our lives that allow us to channel our vital energy into the places that feel valuable and fulfilling, instead of outsourcing our Saturn to external systems that force us into structures that feel inauthentic and soul sucking, right? And real talk, this is life. We will have to do things that we won't want to do and engage in soul-sucking activities from time to time, right? We'll have to wait in line or go to the dentist or go to the DMV or like all of these things that kind of suck. But within these external responsibilities, how do we show up for ourselves and develop systems that feel supportive for the things that feel most vital for ourselves, instead of allowing outdated external structures to totally run the show? There's also this element of time that I feel is kind of pertinent with this transit, right? The sun kind of represents cyclical time. The sun rises, begins the day, which continues until sunset and night begins, right? And then it does it all over again. Saturn represents linear time. A life begins, it runs its course, it ends with death, right? Thelma and Louise drive off the cliff, the end, right? The sun, right, with the sun, when we're on solar time, right, the sun wakes us up when it rises, right? And we take a break when it reaches its zenith and it's too hot to work. And at the end of the day, when the sun sets, we gather with family and friends and community to recount our day, and we prepare for sleep, right? Saturn says that time has hard edges and we need to show up for at a certain place at a certain time, right? And this is Chronos time, that tells us that time is sacred and it is constantly slipping through the hourglass, right? And that time is scarce, and time is constantly moving into the past. Chronos tells us that time can be wasted or lost, right? Chronos time will eat us alive if we don't constantly keep track of it and work to control it. However, with Saturn's conjunction with Neptune, we kind of talked about this a little at the beginning, right? This form of linear time is starting to feel pretty wiggly, right? With the suns trine to Saturn and also Neptune, I think there's an opportunity to find ways of merging that individual sense of solar time with the more rigid form of collective or chronos time. This might be an interesting thing to think about as we move into the weekend. The ways that circular time can meet linear time, in ways that can provide a little bit more independence or agency, and can help us to reclaim some of our personal power without abandoning our responsibilities. Okay, moving right along. We have the also on whatever day we're talking about, Thursday, July the 24th, same day as the new moon, same day as the sun trine to Saturn. We have the sun in Leo trining Neptune in Aries at 2 degrees and 4 arc minutes. So this is a trine is a supportive and harmonious aspect, and an interesting and the sun is basically trining both Saturn and Neptune, who are both basically conjunct, right? And interesting component of the Neptune Saturn conjunction is that Saturn seeks to strengthen our ego structure, right? It builds walls around the individual ego and says, this is me, this is how I do things, this is how I've always done things, and I am separated from everything out there or everything that is other than me. Right? Neptune sort of dissolves that sense of separation. It washes away the walls that Saturn puts up to protect itself. Neptune seeks to return everything to the undifferentiated unity of the whole. And it's important to remember we don't want to like move too far in either direction. We want to find a nice middle path, right? Too much Saturn and we become calcified and cut off from the creative force of the world and the vital energy of the psyche, right? Too much Neptune, and we can slip into disidentification and totally lose our sense of self, which is not healthy either. We need a strong enough ego container to be able to move through the world skillfully, right? Without that ego structure and a defined sense of self, we can be totally swept away and find ourselves in a crisis, right? The ego is kind of like a boat that we pilot through the sea of experience. Without the boat, then we're just sort of awash in there and getting swept away, right? And we can easily drown. And so, with the sun trine to Neptune and Saturn, we get the opportunity to hold both of these truths, that we are separate and unique and beautiful individual beings who are also part of a greater whole. And this is, I think, something to really consider during this new moon and during the week, right? How am I, the individual, also connected to something greater than myself, right? And so the sun's trine to Neptune can arouse a sense of idealism. It can also help us to connect with our sense of the divine or higher power or whatever it is that's bigger than you that you feel connected to. Or even if you don't feel connected to, that you're just like, yep, that's bigger than me. Right. And so this is a good day to spend some quiet time, right? Saturn's into quiet time. Neptune is into quiet time. Taking some time for reflection or meditation to connect in with yourself and the vision that you have for yourself in your life, as well as connecting with whatever it is that you connect with that is beyond you, right? Or beyond your thinking mind or ego identity. Tuning into these relationships can be really helpful in the sense that they can help us to reconnect with the dream or that vital image, that spark of life or the thing that's driving us. Right? As the external world kind of flounders and falters, having a good sense of what feels aligned with that inner vision can be really helpful, right? Because that can help us to orient, right? The sun's trine to Neptune can help us to get in touch with our spirituality, whatever that looks like to you, right? The sun has this molten core that burns bright within us and calls us to the hero's journey. And Neptune can support us with divine assistance. And that can look a number of different ways, but this is one of the tropes of the hero's journey, right? The hero receives a call to adventure, they set out on the quest, and then they receive divine assistance from, a bird or a woodland animal or a wise wizard or whatever, right? But when we say yes to the call in the structure of the hero's journey, the universe tends to meet us. And so being able to tune into that possibility and open ourselves to divine assistance can be really helpful, right? And it can also help us to remember as we tune into whatever it is that is bigger than us, right? To remember that light that burns within us, right? The creative or spiritual practice may be a really good way of remembering that inner light. We may feel called to share our abilities with others, right, during this transit, because Neptune can be pretty altruistic, and we may find ourselves wanting to help where we can over the weekend. Being of service reminds us that we have something worthwhile to share, right? And I think this really makes those Leo parts feel good. We have something of ourselves, a talent or an ability that is valuable and can be needed by others, right? And again, this can be really supportive for the Sun in Leo, who just wants to be seen and accepted or loved for their talents and abilities, right? That they can shine into the world. Neptune transits can also cause us to see the world with rose-colored glasses, right? So we may find ourselves looking on the bright side, for better or for worse, right? With all the man-made horrors in the world these days, this may not be the worst thing, as long as we don't get lost in a Pollyanna sense of like, oh, everything will just be fine, right? But it can be really helpful to take a break from the doom and gloom and the doom scrolling to try and see what is working and what has potential to get better. However, we don't want to get lost in the idealism and forget about the material realities that we are living in. And this is the tension that is encoded in the Saturn Neptune conjunction, the harsh reality mixing with utter idealism. And this can feel pretty destabilizing, and we want to find a balance of being able to hold the failings of our current system and the real issues that we are facing, while holding the bigger vision of the world that we want to live up into. Right? With the Sun trine this conjunction, we can ask ourselves, what is my role in this? And how can I create the structures that help me to create the world that I want to live in based on my most authentic sense of self? And again, I don't expect these questions will be answered anytime soon or possibly even ever. But with this new moon and the sun's trine to both Saturn and Neptune, it might provide us the space to begin considering the ways we can show up in the world as it is while holding the ideal of the world that we want to live into. And Gina Maria says, yes, for finding time to shine light into the world. Yeah, and I think that this is a really important thing to consider this week is like, how do I show up in my most authentic self, right? And it doesn't need to be big, right? Maybe it's just like how you carry yourself, the alignment that you walk with, right? Just noticing, okay, this feels right for me, right? And we don't need to like tell everybody about it. We just need to be in that, right? So, rounding us out, Friday, July the 25th, we have the Sun in Leo opposing Pluto in Aquarius. This is occurring at 2 degrees and 35 arc minutes. So, Pluto, planet of the underworld, who can pull us into the depths. All right, just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in. This can help us to understand the sort of inner workings of things, and it can also reveal hidden or secret material, especially taboo things or things that are not fit for polite company, right? It can also help us to discover the riches that live in the underworld. Pluto rules over wealth, because with wealth comes a lot of power, and that power can be really destructive, right? And also, as we sort of go through the journey into the underworld and face parts of our psyches, it reveals the treasures that live within there. So, as Pluto pulls us into the underworld, we kind of undergo a process of initiation, right? This process or of ritual or symbolic death and rebirth grants us access to power, right? Which is another kind of key Plutonian theme, right? Power, transformation, initiation. However, to tap into that power, we must experience the ordeal. Right? This is another kind of trope from the hero's journey. This new moon can be thought of as the beginning of the ordeal or an initiation that helps the solar hero to gain access to their heroic powers, right? And again, a new moon will continue to unfold throughout the lunar cycle and throughout the month, sort of culminating at the full moon and then beginning again at the next new moon. So we have this sort of like month of this Pluto initiation that is beginning, right? And with the sun perfecting their opposition to Pluto, there might be some things about this ordeal that become illuminated, right? And so in the ordeal, we may need to let go or release old ego ideals or stories that we have been clinging to stay safe or to get by, right? These may have been ways that we have learned to dim our light in order to fit in or to receive love or to belong in a family system or belong in a workplace or, whatever the sort of stories that we have been fed. Oh, you're too much. Oh, don't do that. Oh, if you just do it more like this, then people will like you, right? And we internalize these and they become patterns that we live by. And as we are faced with this initiation into the underworld, we might need to sacrifice some of these outdated stories or survival strategies to create some more space for us to be reborn into a new and ideally more authentic form. So we can think of various descent myths from different cultures. There's the myth of Inanna, who abandons her throne and goes down into the underworld to meet her sister Ereshkigal, and she is sort of stripped of all of her power objects on her way down and has to meet her evil twin or dark twin naked and laid low, and goes through a death and rebirth process to gain access to a greater sense of power, or Persephone from the Greek pantheon, who again went into the underworld and had to undergo a death experience where her younger and more naive protected persona was shed so that she could be reborn into her full power as the queen of the underworld, right? There's also, oh, and real quick, I know we're running a little long, but um, I went and did my therapy exam the other day, and I was thinking about this as an initiation because that's sort of what it is, like an ordeal that I really didn't want to do in a system that I don't believe in, where I had to like go into a room and like take a test that I really didn't want to take in order to be granted access into the world of being a licensed therapist. And as I was going in, they like don't let you take anything in with you. So I had to like remove my hat and my bandana and all of the like magical objects that I carry in my pockets. And at first I was like, man, fuck that. Like, I don't want to do that. I'm me. And then I was like, oh yeah, I remember how the mythology goes. And, Inanna is stripped of all of her power objects and has to go into the underworld or into the testing room naked, right? Without like these objects of power or protection. And for me, it like really helped me to like reframe this experience. And I was like, oh yeah, that is what I'm doing. And this is like legitimately like what the story told me would happen. So that was my own experience with initiation recently. But let's talk about Hercules, right? Who's a total solar hero, a superhero, who performs his final labor by going into the underworld and capturing Cerberus, the three-headed dog who never sleeps and guards the gates of Hades, right? And maybe its heads are the past, present, and future, right? And it's always looking and tracking and being hyper vigilant. And like when one head sleeps, there are two that are awake, and when two heads sleep, there are one that's awake, right? And so Hercules, to complete his labors, needs to go and capture this dog, this beast, this demon, and bring it back into the terrestrial world, right? And so, in order to do this, Hercules undergoes the Eleusinian Mysteries, which is an initiation that follows Persephone's abduction and death and rebirth, right? And after Hercules becomes initiated in this mystery, in the Eleusinian mysteries, right, in this death and rebirth process, he is guided into the underworld by Hermes, Mercury, right, who happens to be retrograde in the sun sign of Leo right now, and a retrograde planet is sort of on an underworld journey for themselves, right? And so Hercules goes down there, guided by Hermes, right, and negotiates with Hades and Persephone, and after some negotiation and pitting enemies against enemy, they are Hercules is granted access to borrow Cerberus for a little bit, right? So he can complete his last labor. But he has to defeat the beast with his bare hands. He has to remove all of his tools, all of his power objects, even the lion skin, which protects him, which Hercules does. And so here we have the image of the solar hero, right? Sort of descending into the underworld and removing all of their power objects and wrestling with the shadow part of the self, the guard dog of the underworld, which never sleeps, this hyper vigilant part, right? That brings anxiety and fear and can tear us to shreds and can literally like pull us into hell. And so we have this image of the ego or the hero wrestling with the unconscious and seeking to subdue it, or learning to tame it, right? And learning to tame or even befriend our unconscious drives and desires and to redirect that energy into more conscious pursuits. And again, I think that this is really key for the Sun in Leo opposing Pluto in Aquarius. Right. And so with this transit, we also have all these themes of power struggles. And this can be internal power struggles, the unconscious forces that we are seeking to redirect or come into new relationship with, or this can be power struggles between an individual and outside forces like collective authority, like the collective or authority figures that hold power, right? That one may come in conflict with, where we may find that we are asked to step up and stand up for the things that we truly believe in, right? That feel really authentic, that we value in the face of the Pluto opposition or the oppression of collective or the Plutonian forces that hold and wield power. And again, with the Sun and Leo and Pluto and Aquarius, we are looking at the tension between the individual and the collective. Leo being the individual, Aquarius being the collective, and Pluto can represent the power of the collective will, the tide of the times. And the Sun is the individual in their ability to exercise their agency and to do what they feel is right. Right? This transit also brings up ideas of power and the right use of power, as well as themes of visibility and how we show up for ourselves or show ourselves or display our personal power in the world. Which brings me to the myth of Phaethon, which I'll close with because, I love a good story. So, Phaethon was the son of Helios, who is the god or titan who drove the solar chariot through the sky each day, right? Which is the arc of the sun, is Helios riding his solar chariot through the sky, right? And Phaethon is his son, born of Helios and a mortal woman. Phaethon never lives with his dad, never meets his dad, right? He just like his mom has just told him that, oh, you're Helios's son. Oh, look, there's your dad going across the sky, right? And Phaethon loves this idea. Who wouldn't, right? And one day he's at school and he's heckled by one of his classmates who doesn't believe he is actually the child of the sun god. And this kid kind of taunts him mercilessly, and Phaethon begins to cry. He goes home and tells his mom that the kids were being really mean to him and that he doesn't believe that his father is actually Helios. And come to think of it, she probably made that up as a cover story for some drunken one night stand. His mom says that she'll prove it to him, and she packs up Phaethon and sends him off to visit his dad. When Phaethon meets his father, he tells Helios that the kids at school were being really cruel to him because they didn't believe his dad was a god, and he begs Helios to recognize him as his legitimate heir. Helios is so moved by this that he offers to grant Phaethon a favor. Phaethon says that all he really wants is to drive the solar chariot by himself and to prove to everybody that he's Helios' son and a total badass. Helios says that that's not really a good idea and that Zeus can't even drive this chariot. But Phaethon is dead set. And since a god can't go back on their promise, the boy was allowed to drive the chariot. Helios tried to prepare his son as best he could, saying that the horses that pulled the chariot were absolutely insane and that he should really stick to the middle path across the sky. And he probably shouldn't go too high or too low because that was going to get super problematic. But Phaethon was like, yeah, whatever, boomer, I got this. Right? And so Phaethon gets in the chariot and grabs the reins and, yeah, right? And as soon as he takes off, Phaethon realizes that he has bitten off more than he can chew. And the horses immediately recognize that this kid has no idea what he's doing, and they take control. And they went too high, and they blazed a gash in the sky, which some say became the Milky Way. And the chariot's distance from the Earth created colder climates. And they went too close to the Earth and scorched the land and created deserts. And there was no stopping this out of control chariot, which threatened to destroy the Earth. So Zeus takes charge, grabs one of his thunderbolts, and strikes down Phaethon, killing the youth instantly and averting total disaster. So, why am I telling this? Right? This is a story about power, right? The solar power. Here, Phaethon might represent the sun in Leo opposing Pluto, right? He desires power in order to prove himself and to find belonging and acceptance, right? Which makes sense. And if we don't have the skill or the ability to hold or wield that power skillfully, it can become incredibly destructive, right? The advice to stick to the middle path is really important, right? And I don't know if you've been picking up on that as a theme in this week's episode, but it's really important, right? Especially as we are confronted with access to power or we face powers greater than what we can handle. Helios, in this case, may represent Aquarius, the collective. He uses his power for the good of the world. He stays in his lane and provides the right amount of light to keep the world functioning. If we seek power only for ourselves and forget about the needs of the collective, then all hell can break loose. If one puts oneself and one's desires for power or control above the good of the collective, then the balance becomes disturbed and things fall apart, right? Or they become scorched or frozen. It's important to have the ability and the skill to be able to use and channel the power of the sun skillfully so that it can create life instead of destroying it. And this is what the opposition to this is what Pluto can offer, right? And can provide us with the ability to grow into our personal power through this initiation and this meeting of Pluto, right? It can help us to grow into our power in the right way so we don't lose our grip on the reins of the solar chariot and burn everything up around us or freeze things out. Because, my friends, with great power comes great responsibility. And with that, I'm out. Thank you all so much for tuning in. It was a real pleasure and a great honor to get to be here. I like to do this each and every week at 11-ish a.m. Mountain Time, making that 10-ish a.m. Pacific Time, making that 1-ish p.m. Eastern Time. Yeah, thank you all so much for checking me out. Looks like there's been some glitches, some Mercury Gatorade glitches on the Instagram. Hopefully you can watch this again. If not, it's coming out on a YouTube. You can find me on my YouTube channel, Camp Wizard Camp. I'll put there's a link in my bio. It also comes out as a podcast. If you don't want to look at this beautiful outfit, then you can check it out on podcast. It's on Spotify, This Week in Space with 3 exclamation points, not to be confused with This Week in Space with 0 exclamation points, because they don't really seem excited about what's going on this week in space. What else? Yeah, come to Greece. We can talk, we can hang out, we can do magic, we can talk about sacred waters, we can talk about astrology, we can do dream work. It's going to be amazing. The go-to, if you're interested in that, I got a link in my bio. Also, there will be a link in the show notes, but you can look up themysteries.org and go to the retreats tab, and it is the Healing Waters or the Sacred Waters retreat. Something with water in it, but check it out. It's going to be a blast. Other than that, my friends, that is all the astro weather that is fit to print. Thank you so much for your attention, because your attention is valuable and it is precious, and I appreciate you sharing it with me. I hope you all have a great week in space, an excellent new moon as we all confront Pluto in our own ways. And yeah, I hope it helps you all to shine your light just a little bit brighter into the world and share it with those around you. And yeah, that's it for me. Until next time, my friends, be good to yourselves, be good to each other, and as always, may the force be with you. Bye now.